Every night, Naomi Carter cleaned the offices where billion-dollar decisions were made. Invisible to the executives who passed her without a glance, she collected their secrets in discarded translations and whispered conversations. What they didn't know. The woman they dismissed as just another cleaner held a master's degree in linguistics and understood every word of the Korean partnership deal they were about to lose. As Graham Whitmore's empire teetered on collapse, Naomi faced a choice: stay silent in the shadows, or step forward with the solution no one else could see. Tonight, the most overlooked person in the building would become its most valuable asset. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The vacuum hummed against the pristine marble floors of Whitmore Industries headquarters as Naomi Carter guided it between the towering glass desks. At 11:30 p.m., the 65th floor was empty except for her and the occasional security guard making rounds. The executives who occupied these spaces during daylight hours had long since departed for penthouses and suburban mansions, leaving behind coffee cups, scattered papers, and the lingering scent of expensive cologne. Naomi preferred it this way. The solitude gave her mind space to wander as her hands worked. Unlike her co-workers who plugged in earbuds to pass the time, she listened to the building. The subtle creaks of the ventilation system, the hum of servers working through the night, the occasional ping of an elevator arriving at an empty floor. "Good evening, Ms. Carter," said Frank, the night security guard, as he made his rounds. "Evening, Frank," Naomi replied with a warm smile. Frank was one of the few people who bothered to learn her name. As she emptied a wastepaper basket, her eyes caught a discarded memo written in both English and what appeared to be Korean. She paused, her fingers tracing the characters. Her late grandmother had taught her Korean throughout her childhood, and though she wasn't fluent anymore, the language still felt like home to her. She muttered, noticing a translation error in the margins. Someone had confused a formal honorific with a casual one, a small mistake that could cause significant offense in Korean business culture. Naomi shook her head and continued, working. This wasn't the first time she'd spotted language errors in discarded documents. With a master's degree in linguistics gathering dust while she paid off student loans, she had developed a habit of mentally correcting translations she found in the trash. A small rebellion, perhaps, against a world that had overlooked her potential. The executive floor was the last on her route each night. She liked ending there because the plush carpeting was easier on her feet after hours of standing. Tonight, however, as she approached the corner office of CEO Graham Whitmore, she was surprised to see lights still on and hear a voice raised in frustration. "Damn it, Martin. This deal is falling apart and you're telling me to wait until morning?" The voice belonged to Graham Whitmore himself, a man Naomi had only glimpsed in company newsletters and occasional elevator encounters, where he'd looked straight through her. Naomi slowed her pace, carefully maneuvering her cleaning cart past the partially open door. "The Daewon Group won't wait," Graham continued, his voice strained. "They're threatening to pull out entirely. Do you understand what that means? 3 years of negotiations down the drain because someone on our team couldn't be bothered to double-check a translation." Naomi froze. Daewon Group was one of South Korea's largest conglomerates. Her grandmother had often mentioned them with pride. "I don't care if it's midnight in Seoul. Get Park on the line and tell him we're addressing the concerns." Graham slammed something down on his desk. "And find me a translator who actually knows what they're doing." Naomi quickly pushed her cart around the corner, heart racing. She shouldn't have been eavesdropping, but something about the urgency in his voice had held her in place. Once out of sight, she continued her work more quietly, ears still attuned to the one-sided conversation echoing down the hallway. 30 minutes later, as she was cleaning the executive lounge adjacent to the boardroom, she heard new voices. Graham had been joined by someone she recognized as the company's CFO, Jack Sullivan. "The numbers don't lie, Graham," Jack was saying as they entered the boardroom across the hall. "If Daewon pulls out, our quarterly projections will miss by at least 18%. The board will have questions." "The board can go to hell," Graham snapped. "I need solutions, not warnings." "The Koreans feel disrespected," Jack replied. "Cultural misunderstandings aside, their last email mentioned specific translation errors that made our final offer seem dismissive rather than accommodating." Their voices faded as the boardroom door closed behind them. Naomi sighed and moved to clean the coffee station in the lounge. As she wiped down the countertop, she noticed fresh coffee grounds spilled across laminated documents. Someone had been in a hurry. The documents were marked Confidential Day One Partnership Brief. Coffee had soaked through the first few pages, obscuring text and creating brown stains across the paper. Naomi carefully picked them up, intending to place them somewhere dry. As she did, her eyes caught more Korean text with English translations beneath. And once again she noticed mistakes, subtle ones that changed tone and intent rather than literal meaning. The executive lounge door suddenly swung open, and a harried-looking man in an expensive but rumpled suit rushed in. "Oh," he said, startled to see Naomi. "Those are mine." He gestured to the stained documents in her hands. "I was just moving them so they wouldn't get more damaged," Naomi explained, holding them out. The coffee spilled all over them. The man snatched them from her hands. "Great, just what I needed." He glanced at her dismissively. "Can you clean this up quickly? We need the room." "Of course," Naomi replied, keeping her expression neutral despite the familiar sting of being treated as invisible. "I noticed there might be some translation issues in." "Just clean it up," he interrupted, already turning away. "And make sure you restock the coffee. We'll be here all night." The door closed behind him, leaving Naomi alone again. She took a deep breath and finished wiping down the coffee station, restocking it efficiently before moving on to vacuum the carpet. As she worked, her mind kept returning to the Korean text she'd glimpsed. The mistakes weren't catastrophic individually, but collectively they shifted the tone from respectful negotiation to presumptuous demand. No wonder the Daewon Group was offended. Just as she was finishing the lounge, a phone began to ring. Not the internal office line, but the international direct line installed at the small desk near the window, used for confidential calls with overseas partners. The red light blinked insistently in the dim room. Naomi hesitated. It wasn't her place to answer, but it was nearly midnight and the executives were closed away in their meeting. The phone continued ringing. 5 rings, 6. She glanced at the caller ID display. Seoul. 7 rings. 8. Making a split-second decision, Naomi picked up the receiver. "Whitmore Industries, good evening," she answered professionally. There was a pause, then a torrent of rapid Korean from the other end. The caller sounded frustrated, speaking too quickly for Naomi to catch everything. She recognized phrases about final opportunity and respect before the caller, not receiving an adequate response, abruptly hung up. Naomi carefully replaced the receiver, her heart pounding. She quickly grabbed a notepad from the desk and wrote down what she had understood. Final meeting opportunity. Thursday. Expect appropriate respect. Direct communication. She tucked the note into her pocket, unsure what to do with it. As she wheeled her cart toward the elevator, she passed a shredder bin waiting to be emptied. A fragment of paper caught her eye. Another memo about Daewon, partially shredded. Curious and concerned, Naomi carefully retrieved the pieces, sliding them into her uniform pocket alongside her note. It wasn't stealing, she told herself. These were headed for destruction anyway. Hours later, in her small apartment 15 miles from the gleaming Whitmore Tower, Naomi spread the shredded pieces across her kitchen table. Like a puzzle, she began to arrange them, reconstructing the memo as best she could. Between the fragments and what she remembered from the stained documents, a picture emerged. Whitmore Industries was on the verge of a historic partnership with Daewon Group, a deal worth billions that would give Whitmore access to Asian markets and Daewon a foothold in North America. But communication problems had created a rift, with Daewon executives feeling increasingly disrespected by what they perceived as Whitmore's arrogance. Naomi opened her laptop and searched for news about Daewon Group. Recent articles mentioned their expanding global presence and their chairman's insistence on proper protocol in business dealings. One piece specifically noted Chairman Park's refusal to work with partners who didn't respect Korean business etiquette. That's it, Naomi whispered to herself. The translation errors weren't just linguistic missteps, They were cultural wounds. She thought about the phone call from Seoul, the frustration in the caller's voice. Thursday was only 2 days away. A final opportunity, they had said. Naomi looked at her own notes, the reconstructed memo, and then at the framed photo of her grandmother on the bookshelf. What would Halmione say about this situation? The answer came easily. Knowledge unused is knowledge wasted. Naomi pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began to write, carefully translating the key points of the agreement with the proper honorifics and cultural context. She worked until dawn, her eyes burning from exhaustion, but her mind clear with purpose. By morning, she had created a document that no one had asked for, addressing a problem she wasn't supposed to know about. For executives who didn't know, she existed. She folded the paper carefully and slipped it into her bag. Whether she would find the courage to share it was tomorrow's problem. For now, she needed sleep. The next evening, Naomi arrived at Whitmore Industries with her corrected translation tucked safely in her uniform pocket. Throughout her bus ride to work, she had debated whether to get involved. It wasn't her place. She could lose her job. But each time she considered staying silent, she remembered her grandmother's words. Your voice matters, even when others don't listen. The executive floor hummed with unusual activity for the late hour. Through glass walls, Naomi could see Graham Whitmore in his office, surrounded by his crisis team. Their faces were grim. She cleaned the outer offices first, working her way closer to the center of activity. Snippets of conversation reached her ears. Stock dropping, board emergency meeting, press getting wind of it. Outside the office of Trevor Phillips, Whitmore's senior translator, Naomi paused. His office was empty, door ajar. A stack of documents related to the Daewon negotiations sat on his desk, marked with red pen corrections. Naomi glanced around. No one was watching. With her heart hammering against her ribs, she slipped inside and placed her corrected translation on top of the stack, unmarked and anonymous. Then she quickly retreated, resuming her cleaning route as if nothing had happened. An hour later, she was vacuuming the hallway when Trevor returned to his office, coffee in hand. Through the glass, she watched him notice the additional document, frown and pick it up. He scanned it, his brow furrowing further. He looked up, scanning the hallway, but his eyes passed over Naomi as if she were part of the furniture. Hey, he called to a passing executive assistant. Did you put this on my desk? The assistant shook her head and continued walking. Trevor returned to the document, reading more carefully now. Naomi pretended to adjust her vacuum cleaner, stealing glances at his reaction. His expression shifted from irritation to curiosity, then to something resembling reluctant respect. He muttered something to himself, made a note on the page, then set it aside, not in the trash but on top of his working papers. Naomi allowed herself a small, private smile as she continued vacuuming. The next morning, before leaving for her second job as a cashier at a local grocery store, Naomi checked the business news on her phone. The headline made her breath catch. Whitmore Industries stock plummets amid rumors of failed Asian partnership. The article detailed how Whitmore was facing a potential crisis if the Daewon deal collapsed, with analysts predicting significant market repercussions. The board was reportedly meeting for emergency talks, and Graham Whitmore had canceled all public appearances. Naomi wondered if her translation had been used or simply discarded. She felt a strange mix of concern for a company that had never noticed her, and frustration that she couldn't do more. After her shift at the grocery store, exhaustion pulling at her bones, Naomi made a detour before heading home. She found a payphone in a quiet corner of the city, one of the few remaining in the digital age. Making sure no one was watching, she inserted coins and dialed the direct international line she'd memorized from the executive lounge. A receptionist answered. Naomi deepened her voice slightly and spoke with a confident tone she rarely used. This is Angela Wright, independent consultant. I need to speak with Mr. Whitmore regarding the Daewon translation corrections. To her surprise, she was put through to Graham's assistant immediately. Mr. Whitmore is in meetings, the assistant said, but he's requested all information regarding the Daewon situation be forwarded immediately. May I take a message? Naomi took a deep breath. Tell him the honorific issues in paragraphs 3 and 7 need immediate attention. The current translation suggests superiority rather than partnership, and the contractual terms in section 4 should emphasize mutual benefit using the formal conditional tense. Let me write this down, the assistant stammered. Also, Naomi continued, warming to her role, tell him that Chairman Park values personal acknowledgement of mistakes. A direct apology for the miscommunication would go further than any contractual revision. And you are Angela, right? Which firm are you with? Independent, Naomi replied vaguely. I've submitted a corrected draft. Please ensure he reviews it before tomorrow's call with Sol. She hung up before any more questions could be asked, her heart racing with equal parts, fear and exhilaration. Walking home, she alternated between pride in her boldness and anxiety over potential consequences. That night at Whitmore Industries, the executive floor was even busier than the previous evening. Naomi kept her head down, cleaning efficiently, while eavesdropping when possible. In the boardroom, Graham was addressing his team, a document in his hand that Naomi recognized as her translation. This revised approach is our best shot, he was saying. We'll present it to Day One tomorrow as a peace offering. Where did this come from? Trevor Phillips shifted uncomfortably. It appeared on my desk yesterday. I thought it was from one of the junior translators, but no one's claiming credit. Well, whoever it was deserves a raise, Graham said, scanning the pages. This addresses exactly the points Chairman Park raised in his last communication. But we can't just present someone's anonymous work as our official position, objected a woman Naomi didn't recognize. We don't have a choice, Graham replied firmly. The press is circling, the board is breathing down my neck, and we have less than 24 hours to salvage this deal. If this document can help, we're using it. Naomi moved on to clean the restrooms, a small smile playing at her lips. For once, her knowledge was being used, even if no one knew its source. The following day, she called in sick to her grocery store job and spent the morning refreshing news sites for updates on Whitmore Industries. By early afternoon, a new headline appeared. Whitmore Day One talks resume. Markets respond positively. The brief article mentioned that after a good faith gesture from Whitmore, Day One Group had agreed to return to negotiations, with a potential meeting scheduled for the following week. Naomi leaned back in her chair, relief washing over her. She had made a difference, anonymously, invisibly, but meaningfully. That evening when she arrived at work, the atmosphere at Whitmore was noticeably lighter. Executive assistants smiled as they left for the day. The crisis team had dispersed. Even Graham Whitmore looked less harried as he departed the building, nodding absently in Naomi's direction without actually seeing her. As she cleaned the executive offices, Naomi found a yellow post-it note stuck to her cleaning cart. In neat handwriting, it read, "Nice. Translation work. Who are you?" She froze, looking around the empty hallway. Someone knew. Someone had connected the dots. She quickly crumpled the note and shoved it into her pocket, her momentary pride replaced by anxiety. Over the next few days, more notes appeared, on her cart, in the supply closet, once even taped to her vacuum cleaner. Each contained a single question or comment. The Korean subjunctive was elegant. Linguistics background? You saved the company millions. Does Graham know? We should talk. Coffee break room, 10 p.m.? Naomi ignored them all, disposing of each note and working with heightened awareness of being watched. She considered quitting, but she needed the income, and part of her was curious about her anonymous admirer. On Friday night, while cleaning the marketing department, Naomi noticed a young woman working late at her desk. Unlike most executives, she sat in an open cubicle rather than a private office. Her desk nameplate read, Sadie Morrow, Junior Marketing, Associate. Sadie looked up as Naomi approached with her vacuum. Oh, hi. Don't mind me. Just finishing a presentation for Monday. Instead of looking through Naomi as most employees did, Sadie made direct eye contact and smiled warmly. Naomi nodded and began vacuuming around the cubicle. You're here every night, aren't you? Sadie asked, raising her voice over the vacuum's hum. Naomi turned off the machine, surprised by the direct engagement. 5 nights a week. That's dedication, Sadie said. I'm Sadie, by the way. Naomi. Nice to meet you, Naomi. Oh, shoot. Sadie's coffee mug had tipped over, spilling onto her desk. She quickly grabbed tissues to sop up the liquid. Let me help, Naomi offered, pulling cleaning supplies from her cart. As they cleaned up the spill together, Naomi noticed what Sadie had been looking at on her computer. Articles about the Daewon deal, with Korean text visible in one window. You read Korean? Naomi asked, before she could stop herself. Sadie looked up with newfound interest. Trying to. I'm teaching myself because of this Daewon project. The company should really invest in better language training. She studied Naomi's face. Do you speak Korean? Naomi hesitated. Some. My grandmother was Korean. That's amazing. Maybe you could help me sometime? I'm trying to understand the cultural context of these business terms, but online translators are useless for nuance. For a moment, Naomi considered revealing everything. The translation, the phone call, the notes. But then she remembered her reality. A night cleaner with a criminal record for participating in a language rights protest during her university days. The protest had turned violent through no fault of hers, but the arrest on her record had closed, door after door, forcing her to abandon her dreams of working in international communications. I'm not fluent, she said instead. Just basics. Sadie looked disappointed but nodded. Well, if you ever want to practice together, I'm usually here late on Fridays. She handed Naomi a business card. My cell's on there. Sometimes it's nice to have a friend in this place who isn't climbing the corporate ladder by stepping on everyone else. Naomi pocketed the card with a genuine smile. Thanks. I should finish my rounds, but good luck with your presentation. As she pushed her cart toward the elevator, Naomi felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in the cold glass building before. Someone had seen her, really seen her, as a person, not just a function. But as the elevator doors closed, her smile faded. Another note was taped inside. The board knows someone helped. They're looking for consultant Angela Wright. Careful, invisible woman. Some secrets are valuable. Naomi tore down the note, heart racing. The game had suddenly become dangerous. She had saved $1 billion deal, but at what potential cost to herself? As the elevator descended, Naomi made a decision. She would stay silent, continue her work, and watch from the shadows. After all, she had survived being invisible this long. But somewhere deep inside, a voice that sounded remarkably like her grandmother's whispered, "Sometimes, child, it is the invisible hand that moves the world." The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety for Naomi. The anonymous notes had rattled her more than she cared to admit. Someone was watching her. Someone knew what she had done. The question was, what did they want? Monday evening arrived with news that the Korean delegation from Daewon Group would be visiting Whitmore Industries in person. As Naomi arrived for her shift, the building buzzed with activity despite the late hour. Cleaning staff had been instructed to make everything immaculate, and security was heightened throughout the building. Special instructions tonight, her supervisor said, handing Naomi a modified cleaning schedule. Executive floor needs to be done by 9 instead of midnight. Big meeting with those Korean folks. Will they be here that late? Naomi asked, trying to sound merely curious. Time difference thing. Meeting starts at 8, dinner after. You're to be invisible, understand? No vacuuming while they're talking. Dust and go. Naomi nodded, hiding her interest behind a mask of indifference. She made her way through the lower floors first, working efficiently while keeping an eye on the time. At precisely 8:30, she arrived on the executive floor, pushing her cart silently across the polished marble. Through the glass walls of the conference room, she could see Graham Whitmore standing at the head of the table, gesturing to a presentation screen. Seated along one side were 5 Korean executives in impeccable suits, their expressions revealing nothing. Trevor Phillips, the senior translator, stood nervously at Graham's side, occasionally leaning in to whisper clarifications. Naomi kept her head down, dusting office furniture and emptying waste baskets while straining to hear the muffled conversation. As she approached the conference room, she moved even more quietly, positioning herself to clean the display case adjacent to the door. "Appreciate your reconsideration of our partnership," Graham was saying, his voice carrying through the partially open door. "Whitmore Industries values the potential of our collaboration and regrets the previous miscommunications." Trevor translated, but Naomi immediately noticed his mistake. He had used the formal business honorific, but one reserved for subordinates rather than equals. She winced internally. The lead Korean executive, whom Naomi recognized from news photos, as Chairman Park himself responded with a tight smile. His reply in Korean was cordial, but cool. As Trevor began to translate, Naomi instinctively muttered under her breath, "Should be Johun Donghang, not Jahan Donghang." She hadn't meant to speak aloud, but in the momentary silence as Trevor paused to find the right English words, her whispered correction carried into the room. One of the Korean executives at the far end of the table turned sharply, looking directly at Naomi through the doorway. He raised an eyebrow, then spoke in rapid Korean. "Who is that woman? She is correct about the honorific." Before Trevor could respond, the executive stood and addressed Naomi directly in Korean. "You understand our language, yes?" Naomi froze, clutching her dusting cloth. All eyes in the room turned toward her. Fight or flight instinct kicked in, but her body chose neither. Instead, she responded automatically in fluent Korean. "Yes, sir. I apologize for the interruption. My grandmother was from Busan." A stunned silence fell over the room. The Korean executive smiled broadly, while Graham Whitmore's face registered shock and confusion. "What's happening?" Graham demanded. "Trevor, what did she say?" Before Trevor could answer, Chairman Park raised his hand. "Your staff speaks our language with respect," he said in accented but clear English. "This is promising." The executive who had addressed Naomi switched to English as well. She correctly identified a translation error, an important one regarding partnership status. Graham's eyes narrowed as he looked at Naomi, really seeing her for the first time. "You're on the cleaning staff." It wasn't a question, but Naomi nodded. Anyway, her heart hammering. "Yes, sir. And you speak Korean. My grandmother taught me. I studied linguistics before." She trailed off, acutely aware of how out of place she was in her cleaning uniform, standing before the most powerful people in the building. Chairman Park exchanged glances with his colleagues. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "we could benefit from a fresh perspective on our discussions." Graham's face tightened, caught between diplomatic necessity and corporate hierarchy. "Ms. Carter," Naomi supplied. "Naomi Carter." "Ms. Carter is not part of our negotiation team," Graham said smoothly to the Koreans, "though we appreciate her linguistic insights." He turned to Trevor. "Please make note of the correct honorific for future communications." The Korean executive who had spoken to Naomi looked disappointed but nodded respectfully. "Of course." Naomi took her cue. "Please excuse me," she said in Korean, bowing slightly before backing away from the doorway. As she retreated down the hallway, she heard the meeting resume behind her. Her hands trembled as she pushed her cart toward the supply closet. What had she done? One careless whisper, and she had exposed herself. She had just started restocking her cart when the conference room door opened. A security guard appeared at the end of the hallway, scanning the area until his eyes landed on her. "Ms. Carter," he called. "Mr. Whitmore would like a word after the meeting concludes." Naomi nodded, unable to form words around the lump in her throat. The security guard returned to his post, leaving her alone with her racing thoughts. For the next hour she cleaned mechanical, her mind a swirl of anxiety. Should she leave now? Pretend illness? No, that would only delay the inevitable. Better to face whatever consequences awaited her. At 10:15, the conference room doors opened. The Korean delegation emerged, escorted by Graham and several executives toward the elevators. As they passed, the executive who had spoken to Naomi caught her eye and gave her a small nod of acknowledgement. Once the delegation had departed, Graham turned to Trevor. "Find out everything about Naomi Carter, now." Trevor hurried off while Graham returned to his office, loosening his tie with a weary gesture. 5 minutes later, a different security guard approached Naomi. "Mr. Whitmore will see you now." Naomi followed him to Graham's office, her cleaning cart abandoned in the hallway. As she entered, Graham was reviewing something on his tablet, his brow furrowed. "Sit down, Ms. Carter," he said without looking up. Naomi perched on the edge of the visitor's chair, hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. Graham finally set down his tablet and studied her with piercing eyes. "You've worked here for 14 months as part of the night cleaning staff." "Yes, sir." "Before that, you were a student at Pacific West University, where you earned a master's degree in comparative linguistics with a focus on East Asian languages." Naomi nodded, surprised by how much he already knew. "And yet," Graham continued, "you're pushing a vacuum instead of working in our translation department. Why is that?" The question hung in the air between them. Naomi weighed her options before deciding on honesty. "My arrest record," she said quietly. "It prevents me from passing most corporate background checks." Graham leaned back in his chair. "Ah, yes, the protest incident at the Global Language Rights Conference. You were charged with disorderly conduct and resisting arrest." "The charges were reduced," Naomi said, a flash of defensiveness breaking through her caution. "I was demonstrating peacefully for indigenous language preservation. Things got out of hand when police arrived. And this prevented you from pursuing a career in your field." "Yes." Graham tapped his fingers on the desk, considering. "The Korean delegation was impressed by you, particularly Mr. Kang, their head of international relations." Naomi remained silent, unsure where this was leading. "I have a question for you, Ms. Carter." Graham leaned forward. "Did you place a corrected translation on Trevor Phillips's desk last week?" The moment of truth had arrived. Naomi took a deep breath. "Yes." "And did you call my office pretending to be a consultant named Angela Wright?" "Yes." Graham's expression remained unreadable. "Why?" "Because I saw mistakes that were going to cost you the deal," Naomi replied, finding her voice. "Because I could help." "So you took it upon yourself to interfere in a billion-dollar negotiation." "I took it upon myself to fix an easily avoidable cultural misunderstanding," Naomi countered, surprising herself with her boldness. Graham studied her for a long moment. "Your corrections likely saved the deal," he finally admitted. "Which puts me in an unusual position." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. "The board is pressuring me to find this mysterious consultant who turned things around. They're prepared to offer a substantial consulting contract." He turned back to face her. "What would you say if I offered you a position on our cultural intelligence team?" Naomi blinked in surprise. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you the opportunity to continue what you've already started, helping us navigate this partnership successfully." For a moment, hope flared in Naomi's chest. Then reality reasserted itself. "Is this a real position, or am I being paraded around to impress the Koreans?" Graham's eyes narrowed. "Does it matter? Either way, you'd be moving up from cleaning toilets." The dismissive tone extinguished Naomi's brief spark of hope. "It matters to me," she said, standing up. "I don't want to be used as a prop or a publicity stunt. If you're offering me a real position with real responsibilities and respect, I'd consider it. Otherwise, I'll continue cleaning toilets with my dignity intact." Graham looked genuinely surprised by her response. "You'd turn down a corporate position over pride." "Over self-respect," Naomi corrected. "And principles, the same ones that got me arrested." A tense silence filled the office. Finally, Graham nodded. "I'll need to discuss this with HR regarding your background check. In the meantime, you're suspended from your cleaning duties with pay." "Am I being fired?" Naomi asked, heart sinking. "No, Ms. Carter. You're being evaluated. I suggest you use the time to consider what you really want." He handed her a business card. "My direct line. Call me when you've decided whether dignity pays your rent." Naomi took the card silently and turned to leave. "One more thing," Graham called after her. "How did you know about the honorific issue tonight? You weren't in the room when we prepared the translations." Naomi paused at the door. I listen, she said simply. No one notices the cleaning lady, so I hear everything. She left Graham standing in his office, a thoughtful expression replacing his usual stern demeanor. Outside, Naomi retrieved her belongings from her locker, hands still shaking from the confrontation. As she exited the building, she didn't notice the figure watching her from a parked car across the street, a man taking photos with a telephoto lens. The next morning, Naomi woke to pounding on her apartment door. Still groggy, she stumbled to answer it, finding Sadie Morrow from Whitmore's marketing department standing in her hallway. You need to see this, Sadie said without preamble, holding up her phone. On the screen was a business news site with the headline, Cleaning Lady Saves Whitmore's $1 billion deal. Below it was a grainy photo of Naomi leaving the Whitmore building. How did you find my address? Naomi asked, stunned. I remembered your full name from your badge and I'm good at research, Sadie replied, pushing past Naomi into the apartment. That's not important right now. What's important is that you've gone viral in business circles. Naomi sank onto her couch, taking the phone to read the article. It described how a night cleaner with hidden linguistic talents had corrected critical errors in Whitmore's negotiations with Daewon Group, potentially saving the deal. The article quoted an anonymous source within Whitmore Industries. This is bad, Naomi murmured. Bad? This is amazing, Sadie exclaimed. You're like a corporate Cinderella story. Night cleaner by dark, business savior by, well, also dark. But you know what I mean? I just got suspended, Naomi said. And now my face is all over the internet. Sadie sat beside her. Suspended or moved to a different position? Suspended while they evaluate me. Graham offered me some kind of role, but it felt like a publicity stunt. Of course it's partly a publicity stunt, Sadie said pragmatically. But it's also an opportunity. The question is, what are you going to do with it? Naomi looked at her skeptically. Why do you care? We barely know each other. Sadie's expression softened. Because I've been at Whitmore for 2 years watching talented people get overlooked, while mediocre men fail upward. Because what you did was brilliant and brave. And, she added with a grin, because sticking it to Graham Whitmore is my new favorite hobby. Despite everything, Naomi found herself smiling back. So what now? Now, Sadie said, pulling out a notebook. We make a plan. By that afternoon, Naomi's story had spread beyond business publications to mainstream media. Her phone buzzed constantly, with calls from unknown numbers, reporters seeking interviews, recruiters offering opportunities, and curiosity seekers hoping to connect with the woman of the hour. Turn it off, Sadie advised, as they sat in a quiet corner of a local cafe. We need to be strategic about this. Naomi switched her phone to silent and pushed it away. I never wanted this kind of attention. Maybe not, Sadie agreed, but it's here now. And honestly, it's not just about you anymore. What do you mean? This story is hitting a nerve. Overlooked cleaner saves arrogant executives from themselves. People are eating it up because it validates what many have experienced, being underestimated, having their contributions dismissed because of their position or background. Naomi sipped her coffee thoughtfully. Graham's going to hate this. Graham's already hating this, Sadie confirmed, showing Naomi her phone. The company's stock recovered slightly after news of the Daewon meeting, but now it's wobbling again. Investors are questioning why Whitmore needed to be saved by a cleaner in the first place. A new email notification appeared on Sadie's screen. Speaking of which, check this out. My friend in HR says Graham's being called before the board tomorrow to explain the Naomi situation, as they're calling it. Great, Naomi groaned. Now I'm a situation. A situation with leverage, Sadie pointed out. Have you thought about what you want to do next? Before Naomi could answer, her phone lit up with another call. This one from a number she recognized. Her second job at the grocery store. She answered hesitantly. Hello? Naomi, it's Jeff. Look, I've got corporate breathing down my neck about your media attention. They're saying it's creating a distraction in the store. I'm sorry, but we're going to have to let you go. The call ended before Naomi could respond. She set down her phone, a hollow feeling spreading in her chest. "Bad news?" Sadie asked. "I just lost my other job," Naomi said quietly. "Too much media attention." Sadie reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm sorry, but this is exactly why you need to seize this moment. The spotlight won't last forever." Naomi nodded slowly. "You're right. I need to do something." "But what?" "I have an idea," Sadie said, pulling out her tablet. "My friend Julia runs a podcast called Invisible Women, about overlooked female contributions in various fields. She's been texting me nonstop trying to get you on the show. It would be a controlled environment for you to tell your story on your own terms." Naomi hesitated. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that. The narrative is already forming without you," Sadie warned. "Better to shape it yourself than let others define who you are." After careful consideration, Naomi agreed. The podcast interview was scheduled for the following morning. Julia's home studio was comfortable and intimate, putting Naomi at ease despite her nerves. As the recording began, Julia asked thoughtful questions about Naomi's background, her education, and how she came to be working as a cleaner at Whitmore Industries. "It wasn't my dream job," Naomi admitted, "but it paid the bills while I figured out my next step. After the protest arrest, traditional corporate doors closed pretty quickly." "Tell me about that protest," Julia prompted. Naomi took a deep breath. "It was at the Global Language Rights Conference 3 years ago. I was demonstrating in support of indigenous language preservation programs that were losing funding. Things escalated when counter-protesters arrived, and when police tried to separate the groups, I was caught in the middle. I was charged with disorderly conduct and resisting arrest, though the latter charge was eventually dropped." "That must have been devastating for someone with your academic background." "It was," Naomi acknowledged. "But it also taught me something important. Systems don't always recognize value unless it comes in packages they expect." As the interview continued, Naomi found her voice growing stronger. She spoke about the night she discovered the translation errors, her decision to help anonymously, and the fateful moment when she was exposed during the Korean delegation's visit. "I never intended to become visible," she concluded. "I just wanted to help fix a problem I was uniquely qualified to address." When the podcast was released that afternoon, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with supportive messages. The Invisible Woman began trending, with people sharing their own stories of being overlooked in professional settings. By evening, Naomi had received 3 job offers via email, including one from a rival Korean firm, LG International, who expressed admiration for her cultural intelligence and personal integrity. She was discussing the offers with Sadie over takeout in her apartment when her phone rang with Graham Whitmore's direct number. "Should I answer it?" she asked Sadie. "Definitely. But put it on speaker." Naomi accepted the call. "Hello, Mr. Whitmore." "Ms. Carter." His voice sounded strained. "I've just come from a rather unpleasant board meeting where your name featured prominently." "I'm sorry to hear that," Naomi replied, keeping her tone neutral. "The board feels I mishandled the situation. They believe I should have publicly acknowledged your contribution immediately and offered you a formal position." He paused. "They're right." Naomi exchanged surprised glances with Sadie. "Furthermore," Graham continued, "Chairman Park has made it clear that Daewon Group expects you to be involved in all future negotiations, or they will reconsider the partnership." "I see," Naomi said, carefully. "So I'm calling to formally offer you a position as Cultural Intelligence Specialist, reporting directly to me. The salary is competitive, and we're prepared to overlook the background check issues." Sadie mouthed, "Ask about responsibilities." Silently, "What exactly would this role entail?" Naomi asked. "You would review all communications with Daewon Group and participate in meetings as needed. Your primary responsibility would be ensuring we don't repeat our previous mistakes." "So I'd be a translator with a fancier title." Graham's sigh was audible through the phone. "Ms. Carter, I'm trying to offer you an opportunity many would jump at. Why are you making this difficult?" "Because I want to be valued for my mind," Not used as a token to appease Daewon Group, Naomi replied firmly. I heard your podcast interview, Graham said after a pause. You said systems don't recognize value unless it comes in expected packages. Fair enough. What package would make you say yes? Naomi thought for a moment. I'd want to build a real cultural intelligence team, not just for Korean, but for all our international partnerships. And I'd want authority to implement changes, not just make suggestions that get ignored. That's ambitious for someone who was cleaning toilets last week. That's exactly the kind of attitude I'd be working to change, Naomi countered. The idea that someone's current position defines their capabilities. There was a long silence on the line. Finally, Graham spoke. The board has authorized me to do whatever it takes to keep Daewon happy. If that's your price, so be it. I'll have HR draw up the details. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. Don't thank me yet, Ms. Carter. Corporate politics makes cleaning toilets look appealing some days. I'll be in touch tomorrow. The call ended, and Naomi looked at Sadie in disbelief. Did that just happen? She asked. It did, Sadie confirmed with a grin. And it's just the beginning. The next morning, Naomi was preparing for her meeting with HR when her doorbell rang. Outside stood a stern-looking man in a suit she didn't recognize. Naomi Carter? He asked. Yes? I'm William Taylor, CEO of Meridian Consulting. May I come in? I have a proposition that might interest you. Cautiously, Naomi let him enter. He settled on her couch without waiting for an invitation. I'll be direct. Ms. Carter, your story has captured public attention and Whitmore Industries looks foolish. We represent several of their competitors who would be interested in bringing you on board, with considerably more authority and compensation than whatever Graham Whitmore is offering. Why would they want me? Naomi asked suspiciously. William smiled thinly, partly for your skills, partly to embarrass Whitmore, and partly because your story has resonance. Companies are scrambling to show they value overlooked talent. You're the perfect symbol. I'm not interested in being a symbol, Naomi said firmly. Everyone's a symbol of something, Ms. Carter. The question is whether you profit from it or not. He handed her a business card. Think about it. Our offer stands regardless of what Whitmore promises you. After he left, Naomi sat in silence, turning the card over in her hands. The proposition felt hollow, trading one form of exploitation for another. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sadie. News alert. Graham's being interviewed on Business Now about you. Turning on now. Naomi quickly found the business channel on. Her small TV, Graham Whitmore sat across from an interviewer, looking uncomfortable in the spotlight. Mr. Whitmore, many are calling this a significant failure of leadership, the interviewer was saying. How did Whitmore Industries miss the talent literally cleaning your offices? Graham's jaw tightened visibly. It's a fair question. The truth is, we became too hierarchical, too focused on credentials rather than capabilities. Naomi Carter has taught us a valuable lesson about looking beyond titles to recognize talent wherever it exists. And yet it took a near disaster with Daewon Group and subsequent media attention for you to recognize her value. Some are suggesting this is corporate damage control rather than genuine change. Those critics are entitled to their opinion, Graham replied stiffly. But Ms. Carter has accepted a leadership position within our organization where she'll help us build a more inclusive culture. Actions will speak louder than my words here today. Naomi turned off the TV, conflicted emotions swirling inside. Graham was saying the right things, but were they genuine? Was she making a mistake by accepting his offer? Her phone rang again, an international number this time. Puzzled, she answered. Ms. Carter, this is Jun Hyun Ki, Executive Vice President of Daewon Group. A warm voice greeted her in Korean. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all, Naomi replied in the same language, stunned to be receiving a call from such a high-ranking executive. I wanted to personally thank you for your assistance with our negotiations. Your intervention showed both intelligence and integrity, qualities Daewon Group values highly. Thank you, sir. That means a lot to me. I understand Whitmore Industries has offered you a position, Jun continued. While we would never interfere with your career choices, I want you to know that Daewon Group has requested your involvement in all future partnership discussions. We trust your cultural understanding." The conversation continued for several minutes, with June offering advice about navigating corporate politics and the importance of maintaining one's principles in challenging environments. As the call ended, Naomi felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years she had real options and real support. Her phone buzzed with a reminder, HR meeting at Whitmore in 1 hour. Time to begin the next chapter, not as the invisible woman but as someone whose voice would finally be heard. The Whitmore Industries employee badge felt strange against Naomi's chest as she rode the elevator up to the executive floor. For 2 weeks, she had been officially employed as the Director of Cultural Intelligence, a title that existed only on paper, until she defined it herself. The elevator doors opened, and several executives stepped aside to let her pass, their eyes following her with barely concealed curiosity. Naomi kept her chin up as she walked down the hallway where she had once pushed a cleaning cart. Instead of the corner office she had expected, she was directed to a small room in the basement level, adjacent to the records department. The space had clearly been hastily converted from storage. Freshly painted walls couldn't hide the industrial pipes running along the ceiling, and the furniture was a mismatched collection of pieces from throughout the building. "Your office, Ms. Carter," announced the HR representative who had escorted her down. "Mr. Whitmore thought you might appreciate a quiet space away from distractions." Naomi surveyed the windowless room with its single desk and outdated computer. This wasn't a promotion, it was isolation. "Thank you," she said neutrally. "When can I expect to meet with my team?" The HR rep shifted uncomfortably. "About that, the board has approved funding for 2 positions to start. You're authorized to review internal candidates, but final approval remains with Mr. Whitmore." 2 people isn't a team, Naomi pointed out. "It's a pair." "The company is taking a measured approach to this new department," the rep replied diplomatically. "Future expansion will depend on demonstrated results." After the rep left, Naomi sat at her desk and booted up the computer. Despite the basement location and minimal resources, she was determined to make this work. This wasn't just about her career anymore. It had become something bigger. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sadie. "How's the corner office? Executive-y enough for you?" Naomi snapped a photo of her basement surroundings and sent it in response. Sadie's reply came quickly. "Seriously? That's where they put you?" "Apparently I'm being kept safely out of sight," Naomi texted back. "Meet for lunch? I have intel." In the company cafeteria, Sadie slid into the seat across from Naomi, drawing curious glances from nearby tables. "You're causing quite the stir," Sadie whispered, nodding toward the onlookers. "Half the company thinks you're a corporate spy, and the other half wants to be you." "I'd settle for being taken seriously," Naomi replied, picking at her salad. "What's your intel?" Sadie leaned closer. "The Daewin deal is proceeding, but there's more. 3 other international partnerships that were stalling have requested meetings now that Whitmore has a cultural intelligence department. Graham's being praised for innovation while you're stuck in the basement." "Not surprising," Naomi sighed. "What about my team allocation?" "That's where it gets interesting," Sadie said. "HR is screening candidates based on traditional credentials, degrees, corporate experience, the usual, but you have authority to interview anyone in the company, regardless of their current position." Naomi considered this information. "So I could potentially recruit from anywhere in the organization?" "Exactly," Sadie confirmed with a mischievous smile. "And I have some suggestions." Over the next week, Naomi quietly conducted interviews throughout the company. Instead of focusing on the MBA graduates and corporate climbers HR sent her way, she sought out employees with multilingual skills regardless of their position. She found Hugo Reyes, a mailroom clerk who spoke 4 languages including Portuguese and German, having grown up in a Brazilian German community. There was Tamara Wilson, a 56-year-old executive assistant who had lived in 7 countries, with her military husband, and could navigate cultural nuances better than anyone Naomi had ever met. And Diana Foster, a barista in the company cafe who had worked her way through college as a translator for a refugee assistance program. None of them had the credentials the board would expect, but all possessed exactly what Naomi needed: real world. Language experience and cultural sensitivity that couldn't be taught in business school. When she submitted her selections to HR, the response was predictably negative. "These candidates don't meet our requirements for management track positions," the HR director informed her during a tense meeting. "We need people with business acumen and corporate experience." "What we need," Naomi countered, "are people who understand communication beyond PowerPoint presentations. These candidates have lived the cultural exchanges we're trying to facilitate." The standoff ended with a compromise. Naomi could hire her selected team, but with lower titles and salaries than standard for a new department. It wasn't ideal, but it was a start. Her small, unconventional team set up shop in the basement command center, as they jokingly called it. Without high-level access or resources, they began building their own database of cultural protocols, linguistic nuances, and negotiation styles for Whitmore's international partners. 2 floors above them, Graham Whitmore sat in his weekly board meeting, facing increasingly skeptical executives. "The publicity benefit has peaked," announced Derek Vaughn, the most vocal critic on the board. "Having a former cleaner leading a diversity initiative made for good press, but it's time to move on to substantive business strategies." Naomi. "Carter's team is a substantive strategy," Graham argued. "The day one partnership alone justifies the investment." "A partnership that's proceeding at a glacial pace," Derek countered. "And now I understand you've authorized this woman to hire a team of what exactly? A mail clerk? A coffee server?" Murmurs of concern spread around the boardroom table. "People with the right skills for the job," Graham insisted, though his own confidence was wavering. Had he made a mistake giving Naomi this much latitude? "The board is concerned about diluting our corporate culture," Derek continued smoothly. "Whitmore Industries has always maintained certain standards. Ms. Carter's unorthodox approach threatens those standards." The discussion continued in this vein until Graham reluctantly agreed to review the direction of the Cultural Intelligence Initiative before the next board meeting. Meanwhile, Naomi's team received their first real test, a conference call with a German manufacturing partner whose relationship with Whitmore had grown increasingly strained over the past year. "They're not responding to our proposals," the VP of Operations complained to Naomi. "We've been trying to renew this contract for months, but they've gone cold on us." Naomi and Hugo spent a day reviewing all communications with the German company. What they discovered was revealing. The previous translator had consistently softened the German partner's concerns in their reports to Whitmore executives, making their feedback seem less urgent than it actually was. "They've been telling us for months that our quality control protocols are insufficient," Hugo explained to the VP. "But the translations you received downplayed their concerns as suggestions for improvement, rather than prerequisites for continuing the partnership." During the conference call, Naomi addressed the issue directly, speaking to the German executives in their own language. "We understand that our previous communications failed to acknowledge the seriousness of your concerns," she said. "Whitmore Industries is committed to meeting your quality control standards, and we appreciate your patience as we implement the necessary changes." The German executives, surprised by this direct acknowledgement, responded positively. By the end of the call, the relationship had been reset on more honest terms. "That was impressive," the VP admitted afterward. "You saved a partnership worth millions without promising anything we can't deliver." Word of the successful intervention spread quickly through the company. Suddenly, Naomi's team began receiving requests from various departments seeking assistance with international communications. Their basement office became a hub of activity, with executives who had previously ignored them now stopping by for consultations. Not everyone was pleased with their success, however. Derek Vaughn watched the growing influence of Naomi's team with increasing concern. As head of the company's traditional communications department, he saw her approach as a direct challenge to his authority and a potential threat to the status quo he had carefully maintained. One evening, as Naomi was working late, she received an urgent message from Tamara. An internal email Naomi had written criticizing the company's executive arrogance in international negotiations had been forwarded to the entire management team, stripped of context and presented as evidence of her insubordinate attitude. The original email had been part of a private discussion with her team about improving communication styles. Someone had accessed it and deliberately used it to undermine her. Before Naomi could respond, her phone rang. Graham Whitmore, furious. My office. Now. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt interminable. When she arrived, Graham was pacing behind his desk, the offending email displayed on his computer screen. "Would you care to explain this?" he demanded as soon as she entered. "It's an internal strategy discussion that's been taken out of context," Naomi replied calmly. "My team was analyzing communication patterns that have created problems in our international relationships." "You called our executive team culturally arrogant and deliberately obtuse," Graham read from the screen. "You suggested that Whitmore's leadership needs a complete reset of hierarchical thinking." "Yes," Naomi agreed, meeting his gaze steadily. "And I stand by that assessment. Our research shows that our partners perceive exactly those qualities in our negotiation style." Graham's face flushed with anger. "Do you have any idea how this looks? I've staked my reputation on bringing you into this organization, and this is how you repay that trust? By undermining our leadership? I was hired to identify problems in our cross-cultural communications," Naomi reminded him. "That's what I'm doing. If honest internal dialogue is considered undermining, then perhaps that proves my point about our corporate culture." "This goes beyond honesty into insubordination," Graham snapped. "I expected gratitude, not criticism." "I'm not here to be grateful," Naomi replied, her own anger rising. "I'm here to do a job you hired me to do. If you wanted a token success story to parade around in press releases, you should have been clearer about that." The tension between them crackled in the air. Finally, Naomi turned toward the door. "I won't beg to stay in a room I was never welcomed into. If you want to fire me, that's your prerogative. But I won't apologize for telling the truth." She walked out, leaving Graham standing behind his desk, speechless. As the elevator descended to the basement, Naomi's phone buzzed with a text from Sadie. "Emergency. Meet me in the parking garage." In the dimly lit garage, Sadie was waiting beside her, car looking worried. "Are you okay? I heard about the email leak. I just told Graham Whitmore I won't apologize for doing my job," Naomi replied, still shaking slightly from the confrontation. "So, probably not okay for long." "Listen," Sadie said urgently, "this wasn't a random leak. I've been doing some digging, and Derek Vaughn is behind it. But there's more. He has connections to Meridian Consulting, the firm that tried to recruit me away from Whitmore." Sadie nodded. "I think he's been playing both sides, undermining the Daewin deal from within while positioning himself to profit from Whitmore's failure." Naomi leaned against Sadie's car, processing this information. "So, this isn't just about me or cultural intelligence. It's about corporate sabotage." "Exactly," Sadie confirmed. "And now that you've become central to the Daewin partnership, you're in his crosshairs too." Back in her apartment that evening, Naomi sat at her kitchen table surrounded by notes and printouts of communications related to the Daewin deal. If Derek was indeed working to undermine the partnership, there might be evidence in the translation records and meeting minutes. As she worked, her thoughts returned to Graham. Despite their confrontation, she couldn't dismiss the fact that he had given her this opportunity, however reluctantly. Was he complicit in Derek's schemes or merely blind to them? Her phone chimed with an incoming email. The sender was unfamiliar, but the subject line caught her attention. Jinselen Samgyejo Itta. Korean 4. The truth is hidden. The other. Email contained only a brief message in Korean, warning that someone inside Whitmore was selling information to competitors. Attached was an encrypted file that Naomi couldn't open. She forwarded it to Hugo with a message. "Can you help me decode this?" The next morning, Naomi arrived at work uncertain of her employment status after her confrontation with Graham. To her surprise, her access badge still worked, and nothing in her basement office had been disturbed. Hugo and Tamara were already there, huddled around Hugo's computer. "Did you open that file?" Naomi asked as she set down her bag. Hugo nodded, his expression serious. It's complicated. The file contains internal communications between someone at Whitmore and executives at several competing firms. Most of it is in code, but there are references to the Day One partnership and something called Operation Reset. Can you trace who sent the original email? Naomi asked. The sender used multiple proxies, Hugo explained. But based on linguistic markers in the Korean text, I believe it came from someone at Daewon, possibly a whistleblower trying to warn us. Tamara pointed to notes she had made. I've been cross-referencing the dates mentioned in these communications with our meeting schedule. There's a pattern. Information leaks that correspond with strategy sessions for the Daewon negotiations. So, someone in those meetings is the mole, Naomi concluded. We need to identify who. The three of them spent the morning analyzing the encrypted communications, looking for clues to the sender's identity. By lunchtime, they had a theory but needed more evidence. We need to set a trap, Hugo suggested. Plant some false information and see where it leads. A linguistic sting operation, Naomi agreed, warming to the idea. We create documents with subtle language variations, different for each potential suspect, and see which version gets leaked. They spent the afternoon crafting their plan, creating multiple versions of a fictitious update on the Day One partnership. Each version contained unique phrasing or terminology that would serve as a fingerprint if leaked. Now we need to get these into the right hands without raising suspicion, Tamara noted. Leave that to me, Naomi said. She texted Sadie for help. Through Sadie's connections in various departments, they managed to distribute the documents to their suspects, including Derek Vaughn, who received a version suggesting that Daewon was considering expanding the partnership to include their semiconductor division. As they waited for their trap to bear fruit, Naomi received an unexpected call from Graham's assistant. Mr. Whitmore would like you to join him at Mercy Hospital. His father has suffered a stroke. He says you'll understand why he's asking. Confused but concerned, Naomi took a taxi to the hospital. She found Graham sitting alone in a waiting room, looking uncharacteristically vulnerable. Thank you for coming, he said quietly as she sat beside him. I know it's an odd request after yesterday. How is your father? Naomi asked. Stable for now. Graham rubbed his eyes wearily. They're running tests. I'm sorry, Naomi offered. But I don't understand why you called me. Graham was silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Do you know why I built Whitmore Industries? The way I did? With all the hierarchy and structure you criticize? When Naomi shook her head, he continued. My father was a factory worker for 40 years. Brilliant man, but overlooked his entire career because he didn't have the right education, the right connections. I watched him come home defeated day after day, his ideas dismissed by managers half as smart as he was. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I promised myself I'd never be overlooked like that. I'd build something where merit and intelligence were recognized and rewarded. And yet, Naomi said gently, you created exactly the kind of system that would have overlooked your father. Graham nodded, a pained expression crossing his face. The irony isn't lost on me. Somewhere along the way, protecting myself from being dismissed became dismissing others. He looked at her directly. Including you. Why are you telling me this now? Naomi asked. Because nearly losing my father has made me reevaluate what matters, Graham admitted. And because I think someone in my company is trying to destroy what I've built, I need your help to find out who. Naomi hesitated, unsure whether to trust this sudden vulnerability. We may already be working on that, she said carefully, and proceeded to tell him about the encrypted email and their linguistic sting operation. Graham listened intently, his expression darkening. Derek, he said when she finished. It has to be him. He's been pushing to restructure the company for months, changes that would give him control over all international partnerships. We need proof, Naomi cautioned, and we need to understand the full scope of what he's doing. They agreed to coordinate efforts. Graham would review board-level communications while Naomi's team monitored their linguistic traps. The next day, Naomi returned to find her office door ajar. Inside, chaos greeted her. Files were scattered. Across the floor, drawers pulled open and computer monitors smashed. Across one wall, someone had spray-painted in red, "Stay silent, maid." Security was called, reports filed, but when they asked to review the surveillance footage, they were told it was temporarily unavailable due to a system upgrade. This wasn't random vandalism, Hugo said as they salvaged what they could from the wreckage. They were looking for something specific. The encrypted files, Naomi realized. But I kept those on an external drive. She patted her bag where the drive remained safely hidden. Graham arrived, surveying the damage with a grim expression. "This ends now," he declared. "Whoever did this has crossed a line." "We still don't have proof it was Derek," Naomi reminded him. "Then let's get it," Graham replied. "I've authorized full access for your team to all company communications related to the Day One partnership." With this new authority, Naomi, Hugo, and Tamara accelerated their investigation. They discovered that one of their linguistic traps had, indeed, been triggered. Information from Derek's version of the document had appeared in communications with a rival firm. But as they dug deeper, they found something even more disturbing. The back-channel communications weren't just leaking information. They were orchestrating a complex scheme to manipulate Whitmore's stock by sabotaging the Day One partnership, allowing Derek and his co-conspirators to profit from the resulting devaluation before swooping in with a takeover bid. "He's not just a mole," Naomi told Graham when they met in his office after hours. "He's executing a hostile takeover from the inside." "We need more than circumstantial evidence," Graham insisted. "The board won't move against him without irrefutable proof." Naomi thought for a moment. "What if we bring everything into the open? Not just to the board, but publicly?" "That's risky," Graham warned. "If we're wrong, the company could face lawsuits for defamation. And if we're right but do nothing, we lose everything," Naomi countered. They debated options late into the night, finally settling on a bold plan. Naomi would host a public webcast ostensibly to discuss cross-cultural business communication, a topic that had made her briefly famous. During the presentation, she would embed coded messages that would force the mole to respond, while Graham and Sadie coordinated with cybersecurity to track the response. The webcast was scheduled for the following afternoon. Naomi spent the morning preparing, her nervous energy palpable as Hugo and Tamara helped her refine the presentation. "Remember," Hugo advised, "the key is to include information that only the mole would recognize as significant, specific phrases from the leaked documents that would trigger a reaction." The presentation began smoothly, with Naomi discussing linguistic nuances in international business communications. Viewers from across the business world tuned in, including executives from Day One Group and other Whitmore partners. Midway through, Naomi transitioned to a case study that mirrored the Day One situation without explicitly naming it. She used phrases directly from the encrypted files, weaving them into her analysis of communication breakdowns. "When trust is compromised," she said, looking directly into the camera, "the damage extends beyond the immediate partnership. It creates a vacuum where Operation Reset becomes necessary." In the cybersecurity room, Graham and Sadie watched as their monitoring systems tracked real-time responses to the webcast. Within minutes of Naomi's mention of Operation Reset, they detected a surge of encrypted communications from within Whitmore's network. "We've got activity," the head of cybersecurity announced. "Someone's sending alerts through our secure channels." They traced the communications to a terminal in the executive wing, not Derek's office, but close. As they watched, a response came back in an obscure German dialect that matched some of the encrypted files Naomi's team had analyzed. Hugo said there was only one person at Whitmore who would recognize that dialect, Sadie remembered. Derek's assistant, Brennan Wright. "He spent 5 years in a small town in Austria." "That's our second mole," Graham realized. "Derek's using him as a cutout to maintain deniability." They had their proof, not just of information leaking, but of an ongoing conspiracy using Whitmore's own secure networks. Graham immediately called board members, arranging an emergency meeting for the following morning. As Naomi concluded her webcast, Unaware of the breakthrough happening behind the scenes, she received a standing ovation from her virtual audience. Questions poured in from viewers, including several from Day One executives expressing appreciation for her insights. Her phone buzzed with a text from Graham. "We got them. Board meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. Be ready." The pieces were falling into place. After weeks of being underestimated and months of being invisible, Naomi had made all the right enemies and was finally positioned to expose the truth that had been hidden in plain sight. Morning light streamed through the windows of Whitmore, Industries' main boardroom, as Naomi stood beside Graham, facing the assembled board members. The evidence they had gathered was displayed on the large screen behind them: emails, financial transactions, and surveillance footage recovered despite the supposed system upgrade. Derek Vaughn sat at the far end of the table, his expression a carefully composed mask of professional concern. Beside him, his assistant Brennan fidgeted nervously, eyes darting toward the exit. "Thank you all for convening on such short notice," Graham began. "I've called this emergency meeting to address a serious breach of trust within our company." Derek leaned forward. "If this is about the Cultural Intelligence Initiative, I maintain that it's been a costly distraction from our core business." "This is about corporate espionage," Graham replied evenly, "and a coordinated attempt to sabotage the Day One partnership for personal gain." Murmurs rippled through the room as Graham outlined their findings. With each revelation, Derek's composure cracked further. When Graham finished, he turned to Naomi. "Ms. Carter's team was instrumental in uncovering this conspiracy. I'll let her present the linguistic evidence." Naomi stepped forward, conscious of the skeptical gazes fixed upon her. She had dressed carefully for this moment. Professional, but unmistakably herself, not attempting to blend into the corporate uniform around her. "My team identified pattern discrepancies in communications related to the Day One negotiations," she explained, pulling up side-by-side comparisons on the screen. "By creating controlled information variants, we were able to track exactly how and where sensitive data was being leaked." She proceeded to break down the evidence methodically, highlighting the linguistic markers that had led them to Derek and Brennan. Her academic background served her well as she presented complex information with clarity and precision. "The most damning evidence," she continued, "is this series of communications in 5 different languages." She displayed the intercepted messages: Korean, German, French, Zulu, and American Sign Language, all containing coded references to Operation Reset, the plan to devalue Whitmore stock through manufactured failures in our international partnerships. Derek's face had grown progressively paler during Naomi's presentation. As she concluded, he stood abruptly. "This is absurd," he declared. "You expect the board to believe that a former janitor has uncovered some elaborate conspiracy? This is clearly a desperate attempt by Graham to distract from his own failing leadership." "Cleaner," Naomi corrected calmly. "Not janitor. And yes, I expect the board to believe evidence, regardless of who presents it." The board chair, Eleanor Blackwell, had remained silent throughout the presentations. Now she fixed Derek with a penetrating stare. "The evidence is compelling, Derek. Do you have an explanation for these communications originating from your department?" "Obviously someone is framing me," Derek insisted. "Probably the same person who fabricated these so-called linguistic traps." Brennan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, drawing Eleanor's attention. "Mr. Wright," she addressed Derek's assistant directly, "you've been unusually quiet. Do you have anything to add?" All eyes turned to Brennan, who wilted under the collective scrutiny. Derek shot him a warning glance, but it was too late. I was just following orders," Brennan stammered. "Mr. Vaughn said it was standard competitive intelligence. I didn't know about the stock manipulation plan until later." Derek's face contorted with rage. "You idiot," he hissed. "Shut up." "So you admit your involvement?" Eleanor pressed. "It wasn't just me," Brennan blurted, desperation overtaking loyalty. "There were others. Derek had connections at Meridian Consulting. They were going to bring in their own board after the takeover, the MI. Room erupted in shocked exclamations and demands for explanation. Through the chaos, Derek remained defiant. You can't prove intent, he declared once the noise subsided. Yes, I shared information with outside consultants. That's not illegal, it's business. This whole witch hunt is nothing but a diversion from Graham's incompetence and his pet diversity project. He gestured dismissively toward Naomi. Eleanor called for order. The board will need to review all evidence thoroughly. In the meantime, Mr. Vaughn and Mr. Wright are suspended pending investigation. Security will escort you both from the building immediately. As security personnel entered the boardroom, Derek leaned across the table toward Graham and Naomi. This isn't over, he warned. I have friends on the board in the press. I'll sue for defamation, leak confidential records. I'll take Whitmore down with me if I have to. Graham met his gaze steadily. Go ahead, Derek. If we go down, we'll go down with truth, not with silence. After Derek and Brennan were escorted out, the board continued discussing next steps. The day when partnership would need to be secured, investor confidence restored, and an internal review conducted to identify any remaining co-conspirators. Throughout the discussion, Naomi remained focused and articulate, answering questions about the evidence and outlining recommendations for preventing similar breaches in the future. Several board members who had previously viewed her with skepticism now addressed her with newfound respect. As the meeting concluded, Eleanor approached Naomi. Impressive work, Ms. Carter. It seems Graham was right about you after all. Thank you, Naomi replied. But the credit belongs to my entire team. Hugo Reyes and Tamara Wilson were essential to this investigation. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps we should meet them. The board will want to reevaluate the scope and resources of your department in light of recent events. In the hallway outside the boardroom, Graham pulled Naomi aside. Well done in there. You were more composed than I was. Years of being underestimated teaches you to stay calm under pressure, Naomi replied with a small smile. I owe you an apology, Graham said. Not just for doubting you, but for not giving you the resources and respect you deserved from the beginning. Apology accepted, Naomi said. But I'm more interested in what happens next. Derek wasn't entirely wrong. This company needs structural change, not just a few token initiatives. I'm open to suggestions, Graham responded, surprising her with his sincerity. Before they could continue, Sadie rushed up to them, tablet in hand. You need to see this, she said, showing them a news alert. Derek's already talking to the press. The headline read, Whitmore executive alleges scapegoating in corporate power struggle. That was fast, Graham muttered. It gets better. Sadie continued, scrolling down. The UN Global Business Forum has invited Naomi to speak at their summit next month. They're calling you a pioneering voice in cross-cultural corporate reform. Naomi stared at the screen in disbelief. The UN summit? That's unexpected. It's an opportunity, Graham noted. A global platform to shape the narrative before Derek and his allies can do more damage. In the days that followed, Naomi found herself at the center of a whirlwind. The story of Derek's conspiracy and her role in exposing it had captured media attention, reigniting interest in her journey. From cleaner to corporate whistleblower, interview requests flooded in, and Whitmore's stock fluctuated as investors tried to assess the implications. Meanwhile, the Daewon Group reached out directly to express their continued commitment to the partnership, with one condition: Naomi must be involved in all future negotiations as cultural liaison. They trust you, Graham told her during a strategy meeting. That's something we can't afford to lose. As the UN summit approached, Graham made a surprising announcement at a press conference addressing the recent turmoil. With cameras rolling and reporters hanging on every word, he publicly acknowledged the company's failures and Naomi's contributions. Whitmore Industries lost its way, he admitted. We became so focused on hierarchy that we failed to recognize talent right under our noses. Naomi Carter didn't just save a business deal. She reminded us of our original purpose: to value intelligence and innovation wherever they're found. He then announced a temporary restructuring. He would step down as CEO for 3 months, appointing an interim leadership council that included Naomi and representatives from various levels of the company. This isn't about optics, he insisted when questioned by skeptical reporters. This is about meaningful change in how we operate and who has a voice in our future. For Naomi, watching from the sidelines of the press conference, it was a moment of vindication tinged with disbelief. She had entered Whitmore Industries as an invisible woman with a mop and bucket. Now she stood on the precipice of real influence, not just a title, but actual authority to implement the changes she had long envisioned. That evening, as she prepared for her UN summit presentation in her apartment, Naomi found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past months. From the night she answered that fateful call from Seoul to today's announcement, each step had seemed impossible until it happened. Her phone rang, Jun Hyun-ki from Daewon Group calling to wish her luck at the summit. "Your story has inspired many in our company," he told her. "It reminds us that true partnerships must be built on mutual respect and clear communication." After they said goodbye, Naomi turned back to her notes for the summit. The title of her keynote glowed on her laptop screen. Beyond Translation, Building Cultural Intelligence in Global Business. For the first time since this all began, she allowed herself to feel not just pride, but a sense of purpose fulfilled. The invisible woman had found her voice, and now the world was listening. The United Nations Global Business Forum was a sea of power and influence. CEOs, diplomats, and thought leaders from around the world filled the grand conference hall, their combined net worth rivaling the GDP of many nations. Among them moved Naomi Carter, no longer invisible, but still somewhat in awe of her surroundings. "Ready?" Sadie asked, adjusting Naomi's microphone pack backstage. Naomi took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." The forum moderator's voice echoed through the speakers. "Our next speaker has become a symbol of transformation in corporate culture. Please welcome Naomi Carter, Director of Cultural Intelligence at Whitmore Industries and architect of the Linguistic Bridge approach to international partnerships." Applause rippled through the hall as Naomi walked onto the stage. The spotlight felt warm on her face as she took her position at the podium and surveyed the audience. In the front row sat Graham Whitmore, alongside Chairman Park and other Daewon executives. Further back, she spotted Hugo and Tamra, who had insisted on coming to support her. "Thank you for that kind introduction," Naomi began. "Though I must correct one thing, I'm not the architect of the Linguistic Bridge approach. That honor belongs to countless overlooked voices who understood the power of true communication long before business schools taught it." As she spoke, images appeared on the screen behind her, not just of corporate boardrooms and handshakes, but of community translators, immigrant workers, and multilingual families navigating between cultures. "We often speak about language as a tool," she continued, "but it's more than that. It's the framework through which we understand each other's worlds. When we fail to listen, truly listen, we miss not just words, but entire realities." For the next 30 minutes, Naomi held the audience captivated as she shared insights from her unique journey. She spoke about the night she first answered the call from Seoul, the subtle cultural misunderstandings that had nearly derailed a billion-dollar partnership, and the team of overlooked polyglots who had helped transform Whitmore's approach to international business. The most valuable question we can ask in any negotiation isn't, "What do they want?" but, "What are they really saying?" she explained. And to answer that, we need to look beyond the executive suite to the custodians, baristas, and mail clerks who navigate multiple worlds every day. As she neared the conclusion of her speech, the screen behind her shifted to a montage of images. Naomi cleaning empty offices late at night, studying discarded memos by lamplight, being dismissed by executives who later depended on her insights. Each image was juxtaposed with her standing where she was now, addressing world leaders. "I stand before you today not because the system worked, but because it failed in a way that created an opening," she acknowledged. "True change will come not when exceptional stories like mine make headlines, but when they're no longer exceptional. When companies recognize that innovation can come from anywhere, and leadership isn't defined by title, but by vision and voice." The applause that followed her final words was thunderous. As Naomi returned to her seat, business leaders and diplomats approached to exchange cards and offer congratulations. Jun Hyun-ki from Daewon Group presented her with a small wooden sculpture, a traditional Korean symbol of wisdom and respect. In the weeks that followed the summit, Naomi's influence continued to grow. With Graham's support, she established the Center for Inclusive Language and Strategy, adjacent to Whitmore headquarters, not in a basement, but in a glass-walled building where visibility was both literal and symbolic. The center became a hub for cross-cultural business training, hosting workshops attended by executives from multinational corporations and diplomatic missions alike. Naomi expanded her team, bringing in linguists and cultural experts from non-traditional backgrounds who shared her commitment to authentic communication. Graham, true to his word, continued serving on the Interim Leadership Council even after resuming his CEO role. Their professional relationship had evolved into one of mutual respect, with Graham often seeking Naomi's perspective on matters beyond international negotiations. "My father would have liked you," he told her one evening as they reviewed plans for expanding the center's programs. "He always said the smartest people were the ones who could explain complex ideas in simple terms." "How is he doing?" Naomi asked, remembering the hospital visit that had marked a turning point in their relationship. "Better. Limited mobility on his left side, but his mind is sharp as ever." Graham smiled ruefully. "He's reading your interviews and telling everyone. His son finally learned something valuable." One rainy afternoon, Naomi was conducting a workshop at the center when she noticed a young woman sitting quietly in the back row. Unlike the corporate representatives who dominated the audience, she wore simple clothes and took notes in a worn notebook. During the break, Naomi approached her. "I don't think we've met. I'm Naomi." "I know," the young woman replied shyly. "My name is Lily. I work in the cafeteria at Jackson Financial. My manager let me attend because—" She hesitated, then continued in fluent Mandarin. "I grew up bilingual, but no one at work knows except the other kitchen staff." Naomi responded in the same language, watching Lily's face light up with recognition and relief. They spoke for several minutes, with Lily gradually becoming more animated as she shared her dream of working in international business, despite lacking formal credentials. "You remind me of myself," Naomi told her, switching back to English. "Don't let anyone convince you that your voice doesn't matter." Later that week, Naomi established a fellowship program specifically for multilingual professionals from underrepresented backgrounds. Lily became one of its first recipients, beginning a mentorship that would eventually lead her to a position in cross-cultural client relations. The changes at Whitmore Industries extended beyond Naomi's department. The cleaning staff now received language training and served as early detectors for communication issues with international visitors. Several former maintenance workers with language skills had been promoted to client-facing roles, bringing fresh perspectives to customer service. Sadie, now Vice President of Strategy, worked closely with Naomi to integrate cultural intelligence throughout the company's operations. Together they developed protocols that became industry standards, adopted by corporations worldwide. "You should write a book," Sadie suggested during one of their regular coffee meetings. "Your story needs to be told in your own words." Inspired by the idea, Naomi began writing in the evenings, chronicling her journey from the perspective that only she could provide. The resulting memoir, Between the Lines, became a bestseller, resonating with readers far beyond the business world. A year after the UN summit, Naomi received a call from a prominent film producer interested in adapting her book for the screen. "We're thinking A-list for your role," the producer enthused. "This could be the business world's hidden figures." "I have one condition," Naomi replied. "Whoever plays me needs to be from a multilingual background. This isn't just about representation, it's about authentic understanding of the experience." The producer agreed, and Naomi insisted on being involved in the casting process, advocating for a talented but lesser-known actress whose parents had immigrated from Korea. As Whitmore Industries continued to thrive under its transformed culture, Naomi found herself walking through the executive floor one afternoon, the same floor she had once cleaned in silence. Now the walls were glass, the formerly closed offices opened into collaborative spaces, and employees from all levels mingled freely. As she passed, people waved and called greetings, not with the awkward deference of those addressing someone, suddenly elevated above their station, but with the easy respect of colleagues who valued each other's contributions. In the lobby of her institute, Naomi paused by the reception desk, where a phone was ringing. The screen displayed an incoming call from Azerbaijan, a country whose language she didn't speak. She smiled at the receptionist and gestured toward the phone. "May I?" "Of course, Ms. Carter." Naomi picked up the receiver, recalling another phone call years ago that had changed everything. "Center for Inclusive Language and Strategy," she answered. "This is Naomi Carter." The voice on the other end spoke in a language she couldn't understand, but the tone was friendly, inquiring. "I don't speak your language yet," Naomi replied warmly. "But I'd like to learn. Can we find someone to help us understand each other?" As the receptionist signaled for a translator to join the call, Naomi felt the full circle of her journey, from the invisible woman who once answered a call no one else would take, to the founder of an institute dedicated to making sure every voice could be heard. "Let's learn together," she said. And in that simple phrase was the essence of everything she had come to stand for. What talent might you be overlooking in the people you pass by every day? If this story moved you, like and subscribe for more powerful tales of hidden strength and unexpected heroes.